Let's talk about some terms and definitions that relate to typography. Here is a list of different parts of the actual character, the actual shape of each individual character. So I'm going to go through each one of these separately, but here is the list. You can find these same definitions in your glossary that I provided for you. So the basic shapes, the basic. Let's start with let's turn now to some definitions for typography. You can find all of these in the glossary that I provided for you, but let's take a look at the different pieces of type. Okay, the first thing that is probably the biggest thing that you really do need to walk out of this class knowing is serif. So serif are these little extra parts on the letters. You can see they kind of swirl out and they just kind of make it look more old style, really, I think. I think whenever you don't have these, it's called sans serif, which sans means without. So you've got serif, with serif, and without serif. So when you see something that doesn't have all these extra little things, like look up here, you can see sans serif here. Sans serif is a little more modern. You can use serif in a way when you want to really look like you're traditional and strong and all of that sort of thing. But for legibility, you just can't beat sans serif. Okay, moving on. There's a lot of terms here that I don't expect you to know unless you decide you're going to be a designer of typography. Okay, so we have the stem, and when there's a really small line, it's called a hairline. The little circle that's on P and O and all of these different ones that have a closed circle, that's called the bowl. If a typeface has sort of a leaning character, the actual axis, just like if it were the world, is right through the center and at a little bit of an angle. These little extra things on some of the characters are called ears. And here is a loop and a link and so on and so on. So really, honestly, all I want you to remember is serif, sans serif, and a sender, which is something that goes above the X line here, the X height, and then descender, which it doesn't even point out one of those on this. How funny, the cheat sheet doesn't give you everything. This is a descender. Descender means it's below, and ascender means it's above. So let's move on to type families. They called them foundries back when they first started making movable type because they were dealing with metal, and they were also probably in the beginning making other things like, I don't know, sprockets and chain and all kinds of different things. Anything to do with metal, they were probably making those types of things. But they also found a new industry in making typography, making the movable type pieces. So that is why, even to this day, people who sell fonts, who sell typography, those people are called foundries. Even though they're not dealing with metal anymore, it's just one of those classic names that just keeps, which stays. They don't change the names. All right. So in the 1700s, they began to release fonts in families because probably they weren't that sophisticated up until that point. So they started making Roman and italic that matched the other typefaces that they were already making. And italic, of course, is this kind of leaned over emphasis typeface. And then the Roman is the thinner, but yet straight up and down typeface. Then, whenever we rolled over to the 20th century, they started making a whole lot more styles within the families, like condensed. That means that the letters are much more squeezed up and close together, and you can get a lot more in a small space. And also, right to the opposite, expanded, so you can really call attention to those words, and outlined. So, lots of different things to learn here. I want to tell you about the different categories. Of course, we start with the categories of old style. Here's a modern. You can probably tell just by looking, because if you've ever seen like a fashion magazine, they're more likely to use something like this. And then slab is just exactly what it sounds like. It's just a big hunk of type. It's really bold and it's really thick. All right, of course, this is a pretty modern serif. And then we have the sans serif. We have the script. Probably this is Edwardian because it's such a classic script uh, type. So display and decorative, that's whenever you have a font that has a lot of character and it can really, like when we were looking at Top Gun before, that would be considered probably a decorative, but it's in that category that you wouldn't want to use it in huge paragraphs, but for a title or a logo or something like that, it's okay to use text that's a little bit harder, a little bit quirkier to read. Okay, moving on. Dingbats and ornaments are these kinds of things. I went ahead and put an example here because dingbat doesn't mean anything probably to most of you. Dingbats are these uh, the little funny asterisks that they have and the different shapes. And the also probably a very classic dingbat is the pointing finger that has a cuff of a suit attached to the hand. And then ornaments are these swirly things that you might use to um, class up a page or something. Like if you're writing a book and it's going to a different scene, some people use those ornaments to separate the thoughts. Okay. Oops. I don't know why. I just moved my mouse and everything starts going away. All right. So proportional means that everything is in total proportion as far as spacing. And monospace and proportion means that some of these are closer, like the T and the I are much closer than, say, the O and the I. And that's proportional because it's trying to make up for the space that, if it were monospace like this one, it's trying to make it look a little more flowy. And monospace is just absolutely, the space is the same between each character. More terms and definitions. Now, I am going to show you examples. These are all found in the glossary. So, kerning. Kerning is basically when you manipulate the letters so that they're closer or farther away. And it's individual letters. It's not entire paragraphs or anything like that. Kerning is the individual letters. And so here are some examples of some really bad kerning. If you put too much space in the wrong place, your message gets totally different. So I'm not going to have a massage anytime soon there. And of course, this is from a t-shirt. I really need this t-shirt. Bad kerning can never be justified. And which is really funny here is because honestly, you have justification and you have bad kerning all in one place, and it drives people who, like me, crazy. This is actually something that was on the street. There was a stop sign written, painted on the actual ground. I don't know why they do that sometimes, but anyway, there they go. But they put too much space between the T and the O, and it doesn't spell anything bad necessarily, but it just looks really awkward. Okay, leading. Leading is the space between the lines of type. Back in the olden days when they were doing type, when they were doing movable type, they would put a thin strip of lead in between each one of the sentences, not the sentences, one of the lines, so that there would be enough space in between the letters so that you could more easily read. They aren't jammed up together and making different patterns and things. So that's what leading is. And you have control over that. Um, we'll go more into this when we get into InDesign, but generally the rule of thumb is if you have a 10-point type, you would want a 12-point leading. So that means that there's 2 points in between the spacing. that extra points between the spacing so that you can have enough room, but sometimes you have to make it more because of the descenders. If you have a lot of descenders, it's going to be something that you have to adjust. But that's the rule of thumb. You need to have at least 2 more points than what your typeface point size is. All right, widows and orphans. I probably have these confused. I think everybody's confused about these, but just know that they are a thing. So widows or orphans, don't leave one lonely little word on a line by itself, whether it's like right here on a paragraph or if it's right here on the top of a column. That's just not done. You need to have at least 2 sentences. You need to have at least 2 words on a line that's by itself, and you need to have at least 2 sentences here at the top of a column to keep from having an orphan. Even a whole sentence is an orphan or widow. Anyway, hyphenation. It is not against the rules of grammar nor design to use hyphenation, but each designer has their own preferences, and my preference is that hyphenation never be used. Just don't. Just don't. In this class, we're probably not going to be dealing with that much text, so there is really no reason to delve into justification that's going to cause you to have to do a lot of hyphenation. So hyphenation, just don't do it. All right, alignment. Alignment, we've talked about some. Center, flush left, flush right, and justify. And this is a good example of all the different things. This is all centered. This is flush right. This is flush left, and this is justified. So you can see up here, we've got ragged edges on the side that's not all lined up. On centered, you have ragged on both sides. And justification, you have no ragged anywhere. So let's go on to the next one. Greeking. Now that is something that throws a lot of people. This is an example of Greeking. It is nonsense words. It's supposed to not really be anything. I don't know. There might be some foreign words that have randomly, like am is a word. So we do have am, but anyway, in Illustrator, when you make a text box, this kind of text automatically goes into it. And if you find out how to turn off that preference, please let me know, because I don't like it myself. I don't want it to be filled with all of this text, because if you don't correctly handle it, it might end up having a velis or a q or a sid or a dim on the end of what I meant to be putting on a paragraph or something. So this is just to give you an idea of the weight of the text. If you have a paragraph, if you want it to be a little bit more flowy, you might not want a really heavy text. If you want it to be really compact, you would use a condensed. So that's just to help you know how that paragraph is going to sit in your design. So don't be thrown off by Greeking in Illustrator. Let's go over some common mistakes. Common mistakes when you're dealing with typography is setting a paragraph in all caps. It's just not done. Well, people do it. Let me rephrase that. People do it, but it should not be done. Just as when you set something in all caps in a text to your friend that you're mad at, they know you're shouting. So don't shout at your audience. You can use all caps you can use it very smartly. Like you can use all caps for a subheading to set it off from the rest of the text. You can use all caps for a headline, but just don't use it on everything. It's tiring to read that sort of thing. Okay, underlining. Don't use underlining. It's just not a good way to underline. There's so many other ways that are so much more legible and pleasing design-wise that you can use to call attention to something. There is no reason to use an underline. You might use underlining whenever you're doing your notes or something like that. You can underline something really, if you've only got one pencil, yes, underlining is okay. But in design, in what we're doing here in this class, don't use underlining. All right. A paragraph is hard to read when you've got it all centered. Centered is kind of like the low-hanging fruit. It's the default way people align text, and it's probably the least legible text alignment. So just don't use it for everything. You can use it sparingly, but only if you're making a friend's wedding invitation or something, or a birthday card or something like that. It's just not a good alignment for large pieces, large amounts of text. Okay, this is going back to emphasis. Try a bold type or a larger type or a different font or color or a combination of those in order to bring emphasis to something. You don't have to underline it. Sorry, I just really mean that. So widows and orphan, you'll need to pay very close attention to this. Don't leave this on a line by itself. You can manipulate the text, you can do a return or something. We'll get into how you can take care of widows and orphans. Just know that you don't need to have those. And don't hyphenate. So let's talk about some hierarchy in typography. That's something that we're going to talk about. I'm going to say that word so much that you are going to be absolutely sick of it. Okay, the little yellow poster. I look at that. I know it's something musical, but things are like sideways and there are letters that are stacked, which are super hard to read. And I don't know, things are just all over the place. And then they've got some words struck out. Does that mean that the wise old moons are not coming? I don't know. It's really very confusing. So that has it. I mean, they have different sizes and everything, but it's just there's so many things that are working against them being able to tell you what's important in this poster. Poster to the right. Still not the greatest poster, but it's very similar. It's a musical poster, but we know what it is. We can see that it's acoustic night. Oh my goodness. We all know what that is. That means they're going to be unplugged. How fun. And then it tells who's going to be there. Papa Roach, Eric Clapton. Oh my goodness, I'm going to be there. And then you see when it's open, where you can park, and all of those kinds of details. And I think that's an address or a phone number or something at the bottom. Anyway, you know what this poster is about. There's no denying what this poster is trying to tell you because it has a hierarchy. Acoustic night is bigger. Then you've got all of your important information flush right. You've got more important information that's separated flush right. And then you've got the final most important thing about where it's at flush right. It's not the most important, but that's one of the things that you need. The important thing needs to draw you in and make you read the rest of it. It's not that it's very unimportant about where the event is located, because that is very important. But if you can't even look at it and figure out what it is, then you're never going to get to where it's at. So you got to have a hook. So maybe that's what I should call it. It's a hook to get someone to look at your poster and read it. So let's do some do don'ts. So here again is hierarchy. So this is a really good way to illustrate hierarchy. So hello, I'm important. I'm also important, but not as important on the top, because the one on top is the hook. And then you can read me, but I'm not essential. I'm secondary information, and it'll get you deeper in the understanding of the subject, and then some bullet points. That's really hierarchy in a nutshell. So do have hierarchy. Don't use Comic Sans. Comic Sans is the sign. Comic Sans papyrus, or papyrus, however you say that. And a few of those other typefaces are the sign of a very inexperienced designer. So just don't use them. Do worship classic typefaces. That's a little harsh. I'm not sure that worshiping is the right word that should be used there, but we really do need to, when we're doing good design, we need to think about the typefaces that we use and to use some that are maybe recognizable to other designers, but mostly very clear and well designed and well thought out, not something that looks like a 5-year-old drew it. So there's a bunch of names of typefaces that if you use them, you're going to win. You're going to win. Here are some more serifs that should be on that list. Baskerville, Bodini, Clarendon, Rockwell, Gill Sans. Oh, it's a beautiful font. Futura, one of my absolute favorites, and so on like that. You can even use scripts and still win. Don't allow orphans to appear in the text. And see, I've got it. Orphans are on the bottom. So I did have them switched a while ago. It's one of those things that people know what they are and they can recognize them, but sometimes the words evade them. So that is an orphan, a word by itself on a line at the end of a paragraph. Widows are at the top, and that widow can extend to a whole sentence. It doesn't have to be just, pardon me, just one word. You've got to have two sentences at the top of a new column from the previous paragraph. If you don't have at least two, then you're not doing it right. So let's do a typography lab. Go to the lab tab and download the Word document for the typography lab. There are different names of typefaces that are there, different types. They're not actually the names, it's the type, like sans serif, serif, those sort of things. So go on your typewriter, type. Not your typewriter, that's a little bit much. Go on your computer and find the different typefaces that you have already loaded on your computer that will meet the style of typefaces. And then I want you to listen to this very carefully. Save the Word doc as a PDF. The reason I say that is because if you save it as a doc, then when I open it up, I may not have all the same typefaces that you've got. So I might not see what you so cleverly picked to put in those different spaces. So save yourself some trouble and just make it a PDF. If the PDF is not, if you can't find the PDF and you can't find out how to do it, take a screenshot. I would rather see a screenshot of what you did than to see a Word doc. Just saying. Okay, then upload that to the Blackboard. So, questions? Text me or email me. Until next time.